Welcome back, everyone, to The Creative Moment, a podcast where we talk all things creativity, how it plays into our lives. I'm your co-host, Dante Bullhauer.
And Jamie Bullhauer.
And I'm a photographer. He's a poet. So we're talking all things kind of creative. This is episode 4, and we both have different bubblers again. So let's crack those open and get into it.
I wanted to go with pomegranate.
All right, today we're talking emotions and how they play into kind of our creative lives, how we try to elicit them from the viewer or the consumer of the content, how we have to think about that kind of when we create it. So I'll let you go ahead and start us off here with.
Yes, well, that's one of, as we're discussing topics and stuff. And the first part of the emotion, though, is that emotions can inspire us. They're kind of become a muse. And for me, it'd be easy to talk about, but it really got me thinking in regards to visual artwork, like, drawing and photography and stuff. Because if I'm inspired, if I'm feeling sad, happy, whatever, like writing has always been, an outlet for that. But how does it actually play in a more visual-based art form to where if you're feeling happy, does that affect the type of photos? If you're feeling sad, how does the emotion actually act as a muse in regards to your field?
So what comes to mind when you ask me that is last summer, there was a couple days where it wasn't like super nice out. And so weather has a lot to play with mood sometimes. In the winter, it's easy to get down, stuff like that. So it wasn't super nice. I don't remember exactly why I was in a bad mood, but I was just kind of in a bad mood. And so I went out to take photos just because I just wanted to get out of the house or whatever. And the photos that I took were very calm and peaceful kind of photos. And then I ended up taking one of me holding my phone, and I photoshopped some text stuff on it and stuff to make it look like I was texting somebody and put some quote in it or whatever. But it very much reflected how I felt when I went out and I was just alone and I was just taking photos, and just kind of that escape from reality that I was feeling at the time was very much reflected in those photos, at least how it makes me feel when I see them. And so just kind of with photography, I feel like it plays a lot more subtly into, more subconsciously into the photos that I take than me actually thinking about, okay, I'm happy, let's take a happy photo. And I also feel like the photos, sometimes it's reversed, and the photos make me feel a certain way because I'll see something, and then the way I photograph it will make me feel differently about that scene than I felt kind of in the moment based on how I composed it, how I edited it, things like that. So sometimes it plays into the photos, and sometimes the emotion of the photo plays into me. So that's kind of an interesting...
Yeah. So in your example, then it's more I'm feeling, down or just antsy, and the types of photos was influenced by the emotion. Where if you were happy that day, you may have taken, some other types. And we'll move into how we elicit, emotions from the reader or the viewer. Because in writing, there's a cliche that there's no such thing as happy poetry. That the idea that poetry comes from deep sadness or things like that, which isn't true. I hate to put you on the spot, but I bet you don't remember Wordsworth, My Heart Leaps Up poem. Yep, I knew it. It's been... but it's a small poem. It was one about seeing a rainbow, and that he hoped that the inner child would always appreciate the rainbow.
Yes, I do remember.
Yes. And just to point out that poetry and writing, emotions can really trigger what you're feeling. And even if you're just keeping a journal, things like that. And the written word has always been a good connection, for emotions. And when, feeling happy in the case of the Wordsworth poem, or again, like some people, really sad, we get our emotions out onto the page. And again, I thought writing and maybe even filmmaking to a degree or stuff like that, but photography and stuff and drawing, like an interesting connection to as a muse for that first part of the creative process. So you had already mentioned that by taking a photo, then the way that you edit and things like that can elicit and bring out the emotion. Like, what are some of the technical, or how do you do that? How do you go out to say, because obviously you got a lot of sports photography just because that's the world you've been in. But some of those pictures really capture when the team has lost, or the victory ones, or even again, that Carney picture, but, some of the softball ones, to where the moment, the tension is displayed through there. But how do you get there?
So it's interesting because with photography and even like a painting or something, the emotion kind of all has to be captured. Like you look at the photo and everything is there already. Whereas with writing or filmmaking, you can progress the story through. It takes a process to kind of get through to express that emotion, where photography or painting or whatever, you just have to, it's all right there, right at the beginning. And so to think about those things and think about, okay, well, I have this one shot, how do I capture all of the emotion? And what comes to mind for me is the Auburn Ashland Greenwood game. And I took 2 photos up from media row. It was at Pinnacle Bank Arena, and I am basically on top of the bowl. And there's 30 photographers. There's five seconds left or something, and it's tied, I think. So Ashland Greenwood has ball, and there's 30 photographers on that baseline. And I knew that I could go down there, and if someone hit a game winner, I could get a good technical shot of the game winner. I could get the guy close up, shooting the ball, whatever. But I decided to stay up there because I had called a timeout, so I had time to run down there. I decided to stay up there and capture it kind of through the fans and with kind of a wider shot, because I knew that none of those, every other photographer wanted that game-winning shot. And so I got it where you could see all these fans, you could see all these players, and I'll put it up on screen. I posted one of the shot leaving his hands and then one afterwards. And the emotion that's evoked from that photo when they hit the game winner, you can zoom in and see individual people's faces screaming. You can see there's a hand that comes up in the frame that you put your hands up, the shot was in the air and the person's hands were up. And that is just something that I was thinking about. Yes, I could go get a shot of him hitting the game winner and it'd be just him, whatever. But to really capture the moment, I wanted fans in it. I wanted all the players. I wanted basically to be able to grasp the environment in the entire photo, instead of kind of just getting a photo of him shooting it, where it could be a shot in the first quarter and it would look the exact same. But the emotion would not be there of that game winner.
So let's push a little bit more. So what technical things did you do after you had taken the shot to make the image even more emotional?
So first, as I was shooting, I composed it so that he was kind of in the lower part, and so that you could see the whole Ashland Greenwood fan base. So compositionally, I composed it that way, and then the hand that's in the photo just came up. I wasn't expecting it, but it came up.
That sometimes at the right moment, right time.
And so I put him in the frame. I had it, like I said, a wider shot so that I could, capture all that emotion instead of being a super tight shot. And then editing it, I knew I just wanted to bring out the color in it, and I wanted to really kind of make that hand kind of a silhouette, and kind of crush the blacks so that it looked like a vignette. Just kind of everything was centered around this shot. And so the outer parts of the photo are kind of darker, and then the jerseys are super bright. The court is kind of subdued a little bit, but it really brings out just the players. And as you go and look through the photo and you see all these players, if you look at the Auburn bench, they're like after the shot went in, you can see the disappointment. You look at the Ashland players and they're just running with their hands up. So just kind of those things, knowing what I want to stand out, bringing out those colors, and also composing it in the actual shot so that I know what feeling it'll evoke. A couple nights ago, I was looking out of my window, and it was the night of some storm a couple weeks ago, and there was a guy sitting on the hood of his car, smoking and drinking, and he was just like laid out on his hood, and it was just like an interesting thing. And so I composed him down on this bottom right corner and kind of had him looking up at the storm, and so it kind of gives the feeling of like all Midwesterners just watch storms or whatever. So
yeah, which the students have told me about them. Like we do.
And so it was kind of an interesting photo just because of the way I composed it. I could have taken just a photo of him center frame, and it would not have had the same emotion as how I took it.
Yeah. So in your group of photographer friends and stuff like that, do you ever send them and say, did I get this emotion right? Like, do you edit like we have done like in class and with writing and stuff like that? Do you actually do like some pure editing?
I've done some videos where I've done that. Photos, I can't think of a time off the top of my head, but with the this creativity video that I posted, I sent that to a couple friends and said like how does this video make you feel? Like, is the message coming across right? That type of thing. So yes, feedback is important, because if you feel a certain way about a photo or video and it does not convey that emotion well, then chances are it's just not going to do well, because it's going to be a confused kind of image, video, whatever it is. And so, yeah, I have sent a couple things. Like, I send stuff all the time to my friend Alyssa, and just like, hey, check this out. What do you think of this? What do you think of that type thing?
Yeah. And we don't mean to be heavy on the photography. It's just that in writing and stuff like that, there's some technique aspect, and there's pure editing, to elicit emotion. Like, word choice is big, I don't want to, I was happy. Well, okay, exuberant or joyful, and also bringing them to a point, as you mentioned before, even in a poem or a song, something short like that, you have a journey. You've got a chance to set up a specific emotion from the reader. Sometimes even like sentence structure, like if you're being suspenseful, your sentences are shorter, you're creating time that's going by quick, things like that. And so it's a little bit easier in regards to that emotion response that I want from somebody. And not that it's still not work. It still takes work. I still edit. It's just, visual stuff is a little bit more difficult. And, as your sister draws a lot and stuff, spends time, and that's just, when the composition is done, that's when if you got it. Mm-hmm. So that's, working with that part and that question, if you've ever sent a photo to go. So the other part of the emotion is a part of our work, though. Yes. How do you deal with maybe the hardest emotion to deal with, or habit, procrastination, apathy, just I don't want to do this, but I have a job, or I need to... Yeah. You have just how do you get through that emotion?
It's definitely a work in progress. It's still something that I try and work through. It's hard because if you don't want to do something, chances are you're not just gonna want to do it because you need to. And there's certain things like editing family photos isn't the most fun thing, and it's not something that like I don't get home and I'm like just jacked to edit family photos. And so that comes, we kind of talked about this a couple of weeks ago, the discipline of just like sitting down and knowing, all right, this is something that needs to be done, whether it's entertaining while I'm doing it or not. Usually I try to put on some music and just grind through it. I'll put on some TV or something that I can kind of take breaks with. I find that I usually have to kind of cut it up into smaller working chunks so I can just kind of handle it better instead of just, because if I have a really long video that I have to edit, editing it all at once is really hard to get through. So just kind of putting it into little bite-sized pieces and just progress, get it done by this day. So work for 5 days just for like an hour on it, whatever, really helps me not think that I have to get this all done. I don't want to do it. So then I just never start.
Yeah, and that's how, even for students and stuff, as if you remember, trying to break up the process, giving you guys like 2 weeks to write, do this, and I was thinking of this third part. I had a friend during the April Poetry a Day month, and we talked over Zoom and stuff, and like they faded out, and they're like, well, it started to feel like a job. And I was like, okay, it's a challenge, and I understand that emotion, but that's the challenge. Like, just because you're feeling, in a sense, procrastination, that it's too much of a work and not joyful, because I think he said something along that lines too. I was like, but that's what you do. That's the discipline, and then he ended up finishing strong and actually wrote a poem about me calling him out about not doing the challenge.
Full circle.
But those emotions, because I'm sure, as you go to shoot state track or something like that, yeah, you could get into the emotion of the event, but, you probably have thousands of sports photos you've seen, and you've mentioned that before. You know what? Yeah, I have written a lot of poetry, but yet during the challenge, during blogging and other things like that, sometimes you just have to work through those emotions that just make you want to just sit there and watch Netflix or not do that, because then that finished product and doing that, a lot of the times it's kind of interesting, some of the stuff I've struggled with or that I didn't really feel very good about, and like, oh, this is, because I knew I worked through it. That's the thing that gets like a lot of comments and gets, and the one thing that I'm like, oh, put it out. I'm like, this is great. Crickets, nobody, that is just done like that because it's just pure my emotion. Yep. And it's not something that I worked through and tried to make sure, so it's an interesting aspect, the way emotion plays into inspiring us, also hindering us, just the other part, but then that aspect of trying to get the emotion from, people who are viewing the videos, reading the blogs, doing stuff like that. And I just thought it was an interesting creative aspect, that we were dealing with today.
So what is your favorite emotion to convey, to write about, to make a poem? Like, what do you really hit on? You're like, you read this and you 100% like you feel sad or angry or scared or whatever.
Actually, the thing I'd like to do the most, and I don't know if that's what the reader, without really analyzing what people have commented and stuff, is I'd like to hit them kind of with, like, not always sad, but even if a poem about fatherhood or stuff like that, like right at the top of my head, I have a poem called Firefighter, which is about your sister being up late at night and just, and hitting them with this. And then at the very end, that little twist about this is what, because at the end of that poem, I take her back to bed, but she's calm, and ends up being a good moment. That even in the midst of really hard things, there's some strength there, there's some joy there, stuff like that. And I like the depth. I try to have depth with that, and I think it comes across in most accounts.
And I think a big part of being able to convey these emotions well is relatability. So like if a dad has a moment where he can relate to that, and it's a lot easier to connect with someone's art, or to feel like you're connecting with the person when they are conveying an emotion that you yourself have felt. So maybe you write something kind of like fatherhood, and more dads connect with it, or you write something about a sports game or something, more sports people relate to that and connect with it. And so I feel like bringing up moments or conveying emotions that people can resonate with and connect to is a big part of how successful maybe that piece of work is.
Yeah, and you see that though even in photography and stuff, like going back to Auburn Ashland Green, that picture or those couple of pictures, I think a lot of people like on social media at that time, and obviously everybody's into state basketball, but yet that was such a fan-based photo. That's exactly the way they experienced it and saw it. And even with the hand, we all know the fans that come, and like people because in the newspaper I think was actually the game-winning shot, or something along that line, and like nobody got to. That's cool in the paper, but oh yes, I was there. I saw. That's exactly how I also experienced that game-winning shot. Or even your landscape ones. To a degree, people who have been there or haven't been there, but they're like, oh, I love Colorado. I want to go see.
It puts you in the photo type thing, or in the poet. Like you feel like you have been in a situation or know what it would feel like to be in that emotional state, whatever it is. So I think that wraps it up for episode 4, Creative Moment. We will see you guys in a couple weeks.